Have you ever wondered what the Jewish holiday of Purim was all about and how Jewish people celebrate Purim? In this video, I will share information about what the holiday commemorates and a little about how it is celebrated today. Many years ago, I worked as a legal secretary at a large law firm. I was assigned to provide support to two associates in the firm. We were relatively young and had a great relationship with two other associates in the practice as well, as we all worked together on the same end of the office. The five of us used to have very interesting religious discussions from time to time because of our very different religious backgrounds: Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalian, Greek Orthodox, and Jewish. My Jewish associate was the one who first told me about Purim. She loved Purim because of the festive nature of the holiday. I remember her telling me, "Well, it's a little like Halloween in some ways," and I couldn't rest until she told me more. Perhaps you are aware that there are 7 feasts described in the Old Testament book of Leviticus, or the Torah. Jews are specifically commanded by God to observe these 7 feasts each year, but Purim is not one of those feasts. Instead, Purim is commanded elsewhere in the Old Testament, in the book of Esther. If you aren't familiar with the book of Esther, I encourage you to read it. It is a powerful story and can be read pretty quickly. It's only 10 chapters long. I love the story of Esther so much that I hope to record a Bible study from this book later and post it to my channel. But for now, let's explore the Jewish holiday of Purim. Purim is also known as the festival or feast of lots. It is held over a 2-day period on the 14th and 15th day of the Jewish month of Adar. The Jewish calendar is a lunar calendar instead of a solar calendar, so the months on the Jewish calendar don't exactly line up with the Gregorian calendar most of us are familiar with. Adar is the last month of the Jewish year and coincides with the end of February and beginning of March on the Gregorian calendar. It celebrates a time when the Jewish people were victorious over their Gentile enemies who were plotting to kill them. Let's briefly look at the story from the book of Esther. One of the themes of the story of Esther is hidden. Just remember that as we move forward. The story begins about 100 years after the fall of Jerusalem, when most of the Jews had been taken into exile in Babylon. By the time our story begins, Babylon has fallen to the Medo-Persian Empire, and the Persian king, Ahasuerus, is on the throne. King Ahasuerus, also known in Greek as King Xerxes, is looking for a new queen, having deposed his last queen after she disobeyed him. He basically decides to sponsor a beauty contest. Lovely young virgins from all over his vast empire, which stretched from the Indian subcontinent to northern Africa, were summoned to his harem for beauty treatments, hidden away for a year before they would be presented to him. A young Jewish woman named Esther was selected to participate in the beauty pageant. Esther was an orphan who has been raised by her older cousin, Mordecai. Before Esther is taken to the king's harem, Mordecai advises her to hide her Jewish identity during this process. After many months, she is selected by Ahasuerus as his new queen and is crowned during elaborate festivities throughout the Persian Empire. Still, no one knows of her Jewish heritage except for Mordecai, who is a prominent person in the city of Susa, but not an advisor to Ahasuerus, at least not at this point in the story. About 5 years after Esther is crowned queen, one of the king's advisors, Haman, takes a real dislike to Mordecai. Haman knows that Mordecai is a Jew, but is unaware of Mordecai's connection to Queen Esther. That connection has remained hidden. Because of his hatred of Mordecai, Haman convinces Ahasuerus to command that all of the Jewish people be killed. Lots, or pur, are cast to determine the day of the slaughter, and the date is set for the 13th day of Adar, nearly a year later. The Jewish people put on sackcloth and cover themselves with ashes and begin to mourn their fate. Queen Esther, who initially knows nothing of this plan, is concerned when she hears about the behavior of her cousin Mordecai. He explains to her about this plot to exterminate her people and asks her to intervene before the king, even though approaching Ahasuerus without his permission could result in her own death. She's obviously reluctant at first, but Mordecai reminds her, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther decides to intervene and eventually exposes Haman for what he is. Haman is hanged on the gallows he had erected for Mordecai's execution. Esther approaches Ahasuerus again to request an edict that will allow the Jews to defend themselves on the 13th of Adar, and months later the Jews are victorious over any of their enemies who tried to kill them and take their possessions as plunder. Mordecai becomes Ahasuerus' right-hand man, and the festival of lots, or Purim, is decreed. Specifically, Purim was created as a 2-day feast to remember the Jewish people's deliverance from their enemies, a time of feasting and gladness, and days to send gifts of food to one another and to the poor. Purim is a holiday without a supernatural miracle. No parting of the Red Sea here. It is noteworthy that the book of Esther never mentions the name of God. God is hidden. But we see that God is still working through the events of the story. Rabbi David Foreman explains that the story of Purim is not that either we are on the stage or God is on the stage, but that people accomplish great things with God. Though God may seem hidden, God is closer to us than we think. We aren't alone, and Purim allows the Jewish people to celebrate the everyday nature of God being with them, even when God seems hidden. In the immediacy of life, the providence of God isn't always seen. So, how is Purim celebrated? First of all, this holiday doesn't have some of the prohibitions regarding work that other Jewish holidays do. So Jews are permitted to engage in work, even manual labor, and go to school on Purim. On the 13th of Adar, the day before Purim, the Jewish people observe a fast, reminiscent of the fast that Esther observed before first approaching King Ahasuerus to plead her case to save her people. Then, on the 14th of Adar, Jewish people celebrate Purim in their synagogues, and the scroll of Esther, referred to as the Megillah, is read. Specific prayers are added to the daily prayers always used in Jewish worship. Some synagogues also produce plays retelling the story. Every time Haman's name is mentioned, the people boo, stamp their feet, or use noisemakers called groggers to blot out his name. When Mordecai's name is mentioned, there is cheering. As part of the public celebration in some communities, parades are organized. People wear masks, hiding their faces. Some wear elaborate costumes, which is why my friend said that Purim was sort of like the American Halloween. Purim sometimes occurs near the time of Mardi Gras or Carnival, which is celebrated in some countries prior to the beginning of the Christian season of Lent. I am told the festivities of Purim can feel a lot like Mardi Gras. Remember that day of fasting on the 13th day of Adar, the day prior to Purim? Well, Part of a Purim celebration is a big festive meal on the day after that fast, complete with lots of wine. One of the foods associated with Purim is hamantaschen, a triangle-shaped cookie filled with poppy seed or fruit filling partially concealed inside the pastry. Hamantaschen are also called Haman's pockets, Haman's ears, or Haman's hats. Jews also exchange gifts of food and drink with their friends and family, and they make donations to charity for the poor as part of their observance of Purim. In fact, in Jewish law there are 4 mitzvah or commands for Purim. The first is to hear the Megillah, or the Scroll of Esther, being read. The second is to have a Purim meal. The third is to send gifts of food to family and friends. The fourth is to give money to the poor. In closing, what can Christians learn about the Jewish holiday of Purim? Again, looking at the story from the book of Esther, we are reminded that while God may seem hidden, He is always working together things for our good. Even when God seems far away or even not present, God is still active and in control. God protects us and provides for us, just as Mordecai assured Esther in the story. Relief and deliverance will arise. As Christians, we believe that ultimately our relief from evil and our redemption to God is provided by God and comes from Jesus, our Messiah. Today, I hope that you will reflect on how God is working in your life, even when God seems hidden from view. Thanks for listening.